A very good morning and welcome. Today, we have Brother Billy as our esteemed speaker. He is gracious enough to come back again to share with us some Dhamma wisdom. Brother Billy Tan is a retired business development consultant certified as Master Practitioner of Neuro-Linguistic Programming, NLP, clinical hypnotherapist, laughter yoga teacher, and laughter ambassador. In sharing the Dharma, Brother Billy studied under the late Venerable Dr. M. Punaji Mahathera and has delivered Dharma sharing throughout Peninsular Malaysia. In recent years, Brother Billy has shared the Dharma extensively in the Philippines as resident Dharma lecturer at Wisdom Park, Manila, as well as to Catholic seminary students, universities, theosophical societies, and also to inmates at the women's prison in Metro Manila. Brother Billy, we welcome you, and the live stream is all yours.
Thank you, brother, for the fine introduction. Good morning, brothers and sisters in the Dharma. Thank you for joining us. Today, we are having a very interesting topic. Let me just get it on. All right. So, the topic is Dhana, the first perfection, the first PΑRAMI. Right? There are 10 perfections that are recommended for Buddhists who want to partake in serious cultivation and development. And these 10 perfections are not something easy to cultivate within one lifetime. Right? So we're going to take a look at a story today about how the Buddha, before he became enlightened as the Bodhisattva, going back many countless lives, that he started this cultivation of the 10 perfections. And Dhana is the very first perfection. So before we begin, I would like to share with you this link. Please feel free to download from this link the presentation file that goes along with today's sharing. So I hope you will find this interesting. So you can use these slides to go along with today's sharing. Okay, so I hope this will help you to gain a better understanding of today's sharing. So let us now begin without further ado, looking at the 10 perfections. And Dhana is the first one, which basically talks about generosity in the simple form, and then charity. As it deepens, then it goes to the most supreme state of giving, that is, giving of oneself. Of course, when we give of our wealth, our abundance, that is very good. But as we go along, we begin to give more and more of what we have. Some of it may not even be in abundance. And even some people who are not well off, they are also giving whatever they can. So finally, the highest form of giving is giving of oneself. And we're going to take a look at a very short story of that happening to one of the previous lives of Bodhisattva Siddhartha. So, before Bodhisattva Siddhartha became fully enlightened as the Samasan Buddha, in one of his lives, he actually gave his life. Right? We will look at that story in a moment. So let's go back to the beginning. I guess the oldest known story of previous lives of the Bodhisattva goes back to the time of one of the 28 Samasan Buddhas in the past. Okay, so in the Theravada tradition, we are aware of 28 Samasan Buddhas, and these are basically the supremely enlightened Buddhas who came and taught, right? So these are the Samasan Buddhas. Now, some texts mention only 25. That means they go back to Dipankara. But actually, there are also mention of 3 more before Dipankara. Their names were known, but details were not mentioned. So going back to the time of Dipankara, there was a young man by the name of Sumedha. And this is one of the previous lives of the Bodhisattva, Siddhartha. Before he was born in his last human life as Siddhartha, one of his previous life was Sumedha. He was basically an ascetic, so to speak. So basically he was practicing, trying to perfect himself. But of course he was not sure how to do it. He didn't have a proper teacher, but he knew that it is important to be good. So going back to those days, people already knew the right thing to do is those three things that the Buddha has been, all the Buddhas have been teaching, right? Avoid evil, do good, purify mind. This has been the teachings of all the Buddhas, right? So the young ascetics like Sumedha was well aware of that, but he didn't know what else to go along with it. So one day he heard, well, Sumedha was living in the mountains and occasionally going down to the villages to get alms food. Then one day he heard from the villagers that this Samasan Buddha, Dipankara, would be coming to a village nearby, a very large village nearby. So he was very excited. So he offered his help. Sumedha went to that village and offered to prepare everything for the arrival of Buddha Dipankara. And a lot of villagers were helping to pave the road because, you know, you have to understand in ancient India, even as of today in the countryside, the roads are not like today, well paved and whatever. The roads are all muddy and full of potholes. And if it had rain, then there will be a lot of rainwater collected and puddles of rainwater. So the road would not be nice for people to walk. And, you know, these monks in their robes, if they walk along the road, then of course they could soil their robes. So a lot of villagers were helping to pave the road. And this Sumedha offered to pave a particular stretch of the road, to lay the stones and the sand and the gravel so that it's no longer full of mud, it's no longer wet. But as he was doing that, he realized that he alone was not able to finish the work, and he heard the Buddha Dipankara was arriving already. They are already on the outside of the village, starting to enter the village. So it was too late for him to finish the work. So when the Buddha Dipankara and his contingency of monks arrived to the area where Sumedha was paving the road, what Sumedha did was he lay his body down to cover those patches of puddles of water so that the Buddha Dipankara and his contingent of monks would be able to walk over his body so that they don't get their feet soiled in the puddles of mud. Right? So he actually sacrificed his body to let the monks walk over him so that they do not have to step into mud. And that was a very supreme sacrifice. And in fact, as a result of that sacrifice, the Buddha Dipankara realized something about this young man, Sumedha. So as Sumedha rose up and paid homage to the Buddha Dipankara, Sumedha asked the Buddha Dipankara about cultivation. How can I cultivate myself to become enlightened like you? And that was basically something that Sumedha wanted to do. So it was his aspiration in life. And Buddha Dipankara, looking at Sumedha, realized something about this young ascetic Sumedha. And he made a prediction. Then he said that Sumedha will one day become the Buddha Gautama. So in other words, Buddha Dipankara had already predicted that Sumedha will one day be reborn and become enlightened as the Samasan Buddha Gautama. So he already predicted that. And Sumedha asked Buddha Dipankara, how can I cultivate myself? And that was when the Buddha Dipankara told Sumedha about the 10 perfections. So there were 10 things that Sumedha had to cultivate and develop in order to perfect himself. So these are called the 10 perfections. Okay, so that is basically the story behind how the Bodhisattva first started aspiring to become the Buddha. And that was the oldest story, the oldest known story of the past lives of the Buddha before he became enlightened. So that's why he was referred to as a Bodhisattva. In the Theravada tradition, we use the word Bodhisatta, S-A-T-T-A, not S-A-T-V-A, Bodhisattva. Bodhisattva is a Sanskrit word which is used by the Mahayanas and also the Vajrayanas. But the Theravadins use the Pali version, which is Bodhisatta, not Bodhisattva, okay? So it's Bodhisatta Sumedha, and meeting Dipankara, learning about the 10 perfections, and then he made a vow that I will now cultivate these 10 perfections. So in the Theravada tradition, that would be more or less the equivalent of what is called the Bodhisatta vow. But this is basically vowing to perfect himself with the 10 perfections. And the first one being Dana. Now, we don't go into talking about the 10 perfections because it's a long list and it would take a lot. What we are focusing on today is this, the first perfection, that is Dana. Simply put, Dana means giving. But to take it one step further, it is sacrificing or offering, you know. So it's more than just giving something to somebody. Of course, giving something to somebody is called Dana. That is a simple version. But today we're going to examine in the tradition of the teachings of the Buddha, how deep can this giving go? So we're going to take a look at the story of how deep can this giving become. And so now at a later time, when Sumedha was reborn life after life, right, and one time he was reborn as a prince, Prince Sattva. And Prince Sattva actually, we all know that is one of the previous lives of Gautama Buddha. So he was Prince Sattva. He was the son of a king. And in fact, this story was similar to Siddhartha. Prince Sattva left the palace, gave up his princely life to practice and cultivate himself. Because, you know, when we begin cultivating as a bodhisattva, one life after another, we will remember some of the cultivations. So Prince Sattva realized that he had still got a lot to do to cultivate himself, to cultivate the 10 perfections, the 10 paramis. So he decided to give up his princely life and went to become an ascetic, practicing in the forests and the mountains. And because he did that, he started collecting a few disciples. People started to realize he was a good teacher, so they followed him. So one day, he went around the mountains together with his students to find a place where they can sit down in peace and have some Dharma talk and then practice their meditation. So they came to a cliff, and looking down at the bottom of the cliff, the Prince Sattva and those young ascetics, they saw a tigress. A tigress was about to eat one of her cubs because this tigress looked like she was very desperate, very hungry. And because she was too weak to hunt, she was no longer able to hunt any wild game, any prey to feed her cubs. And she herself was on the verge of dying from hunger. So this tigress had no choice but had to eat one of her cubs. Apparently there were 3 cubs. There were various stories. Some said 4 cubs. The tigress already ate one. Some said there were 3 cubs. The tigress was about to eat the first one, and so on. Whatever it is, the tigress was about to eat one of the cubs. Seeing that, Prince Sattva realized that he had to do something. So he asked all his students, go out and hunt for food, get something, some meat or whatever it is you can get to feed the tigress. Otherwise, the poor tigress is going to destroy her own purity by killing one of her own cubs. So all the students went out and started looking for food to feed the tigress. But that was actually Prince Sattva was thinking to himself, right? So the Bodhisattva reflected that his own body had so much flesh, and by giving it up, he could actually save the tigress immediately. There is no need to wait for the students, because there's no certainty that his students could go out and find enough food to feed the tigress, or the right kind of food to feed the tigress, because the tigress needed to eat meat. So Prince Sattva realized that if he gave his body, sacrificed his body for the tigress to eat, then the tigress would not kill her own cubs, thereby preserving the purity of the mother tigress. So by that, Prince Sattva then leapt off the cliff, knowing that he will fall to his death, landing right next to the tigress and allowing the tigress to eat his body. So this is the most supreme form of dana you can ever think of, when you give up your own life to relieve others of their suffering. The most supreme form of offering, the most supreme form of dana. And many of you might have seen this image here. You will find many similar paintings showing a tigress eating a monk or an ascetic together with a couple of cubs. Sometimes you will see 2 cubs, sometimes you will see 3 cubs, right? So he wasn't sure whether the tigress had already eaten one of the cubs, but whatever it is, the story is about this most supreme form of giving, the most supreme form of dana, right? So now we're going to take a look at the Dhammapada verse, number 177. I'm only taking an excerpt from that verse. The verse is a little longer than this, but the short version says, the wise rejoices in giving, and by that alone does one become happy hereafter. Which means wise people don't just give, they feel joyful giving. Giving to them is not losing something. Giving to them is actually an act of gratitude and an act of peace to offer to others who need your help, right? And by doing so, now this last part that says become happy hereafter, this is actually not only referring to the person becoming happy immediately, but also will be reborn in a happy realm, will be reborn in a happy plane. That means could be reborn in the higher realm, and or reborn in a more fortunate environment of abundance. You know, one of the most painful things is to be reborn in an environment of lacking, right? Of striving, right? Born in a very poor family, day in, day out, you have to strive. But if you were born in a well-to-do family, then you don't have to really strive day by day, minute by minute, just to earn a living. So here, that is the meaning, that when the wise people give, they rejoice in the giving, and they can be reborn in a happier place, either as in a happier family with abundance, or reborn in the higher realms. So later on, we're going to talk about this rebirth in the higher realm, right? So let's go and take a look at the full verse of this Dhammapada verse 177, right? Where it is translated here, and it says, misers fare not to the heavenly world, nor do fools praise charity. But the wise rejoice in giving, and by that do they find happiness in the life hereafter. Right? So this is really referring to people who are stingy and miserly, selfish. They will never be reborn in the higher realm. They will never be reborn in a better place. right? And people who are foolish, they will never praise the doing of charity. But the wise, they give and they rejoice in the giving. And by doing so, they find happiness, not only immediately, but also afterwards, and also in the life hereafter, in future lives. Right? Let's take a look at the story behind this verse, why the Buddha spoke this verse. There is a very interesting story because the Buddha had very strong supporters from lay people, and one of his strongest supporter was there were many kings who had supported the Buddha, right? So one of the most famous king that had been a good support of the Buddha was King Pasenadi, right? Pasenadi was a very wealthy king in the land of Kosa or Kosalan. So he was a very wealthy king, and at that time the Buddha was residing in the Jetavana monastery when King Pasenadi came to visit the Buddha. And this was the time after a big event, a big Dhana, the Buddha then recited this verse. Okay, so the story goes that this King Pasenadi started offering alms to the Buddha and his monks. And it was a grand scale. He wasn't just giving Dhana, he was doing big offering, you know. So it was a very happy event, big event, inviting all the villagers to come and join in and all that, sharing and rejoicing in the alms giving. But the interesting thing is that the villagers, seeing the king does that, they got excited, especially the wealthy villagers. They got a little excited. Well, if the king does that, why don't we do that also? So a group of wealthy villagers started to even compete with the king. Amazing, you know. Intent on competing with the king, there was a group of subjects who also offered alms giving in a grand scale, and they were making it grander and grander. So they started to make ceremony, even big ceremony of giving Dhana. And so the scale and the event become bigger and bigger. And of course, the king doesn't like to be outdone, you see. King also have a little bit of ego. You must understand he's not an enlightened being, but he also has a little bit of ego. So the king and his subjects started to compete with each other, one after another, offering alms. So week by week, the offering was getting bigger and bigger until the king one day realized that it was tough to compete. But the wife of the king, the Queen Malik, right? Queen Malik was a very intelligent lady. So she came up with a grand plan and advised the king what to do. So the queen then asked the king, King Pasenadi, to construct a grand pavilion, a big pavilion, outdoor thing, right, with a big shelter. And then she asked for 500 white umbrellas to be placed out there for the monks. So these umbrellas, and together with 500 tame elephants. Of course, the king could afford it. So 500 umbrellas with these 500 elephants that were holding the umbrellas to shield the 500 monks. Wow, this is amazing, right? And in the middle of the pavilion, there would be 10 boats filled with all kinds of perfumes, incense, and necessary requisites for the monks. So it was a really super grand event. And there lined up 250 princesses. Well, princesses were basically ladies in the palace. All the beautiful children of the senior court officials or whatever, the daughters of the senior court officials and so on. So some of them were, of course, his King Pasenadi's own children, own daughters. So there were 250 princesses serving the monks. And they would actually be fanning the monks, each one fanning 2 monks and so on, right? So that was so grand. The villagers, the wealthy villagers realized they cannot compete anymore, right? Since the subjects had no princesses, or nor do they have white umbrellas, nor even elephants or 500 elephants. They could no longer compete with the king. So in that respect, the king won. It was so grand, the king won. And of course, at that time, when all the activities were over, at the end of it, when all preparations were completed, alms food were offered to the Mahasangha, and after the big meal, everybody was so happy and contented. And the king also offered all the items in the pavilion, the perfumes and the incenses and the necessary requisites, offered a whole bunch of them, very expensive things and good, useful, helpful things, gave it to all the monks. And it was estimated it was worth 14 billion. Now, in the script in the Dhammapada, it was only mentioned 14 billion. There was no mention what kind of currency. Maybe 14 billion pieces of silver or whatever it is, or whatever the currency at that time. But whatever it is, 14 billion is a lot of money. Even if 14 billion cents, single cent, that's still a lot of money. 14 billion, whatever it is. So that's a huge sum of money. Right? So at that time, then two of the senior ministers happened to be standing next to the king. They were there. One of them was very happy, and that is the minister Junha. So Junha was very happy, very pleased, and he praised the king for being so generous, offering all these alms and so generously offering these to the Buddha and the monks. So Junha was rejoicing in the good deeds of the king. And he also reflected that these offerings could only be made by a great king, not by anybody, not even a small-time chieftain or small-time king. Must be a great king. So he was really praising the king for his great generosity. And he was also happy and grateful that the king shared the merits, because Pasenadi was not selfish, because he knew that making this offering, he would earn a lot of merits, and then he shared it with the villagers. May all beings be well, peaceful, comfortable, and happy. So shared it with all the villagers. So this minister Junha praised the king for sharing the merits with the villagers. So Minister Junha rejoiced in the king in his unrivaled, magnanimous offering of charity. And the other minister, on the other hand, Minister Kala, on the other hand, he was a little bit envious. So he thought that the king was only squandering and showing off, giving away 14 billion in a single day. What a waste of money. And that the monks would just go back and sleep and forget about it. You know, that's what Minister Kala was saying. What's the point of offering to the monks? The monks would just go back and sleep and forget about what was offered, you know. So he was like a skeptic and a cynic. And after the meal, the Buddha realized what was going on, that this Minister Junha was grateful, but Minister Kala was basically very unhappy that the king was so generous. For whatever reason, he was a bit envious. So the Buddha was well aware of it, because the Buddha could see, you know, could read what other people are feeling and thinking, and notice this Minister Kala was so unhappy, so resentful of what the king did. Maybe Kala was hoping the king would offer the money to him, you know. So the Buddha thought that if after the meal, if the Buddha went on, see, normally after a dana like that, a grand dana, the Buddha would give a full dispensation, a full Dhamma talk. But realizing that if he went ahead to deliver a lengthy discourse of appreciation, this Minister Kala would actually feel worse and worse. His mind would become more and more polluted. He knew that if he went ahead and gave a long discourse, Minister Kala could become so irritated and even more dissatisfied. And because of his unwholesome thinking, because of Kala's unwholesome thinking, he knew that Minister Kala would suffer in his next life. That means when you become envious and become resentful of other people's offering, you don't rejoice in the good deeds, then you could be suffering because of the unwholesomeness of your mind. So realizing that, the Buddha refrained from giving a long discourse. So finally, when the king approached the Buddha after a short Thanksgiving words, King Pasenadi approached the Buddha, and the Buddha then declared to King Pasenadi, "Great king, you should rejoice that you have succeeded in making such an offering of unrivaled charity." So the offering of unrivaled charity is called Asadisadana, right? So I'm sorry, my pronunciation of Pali words are not so good, but that is the word that means supreme charity, right? So such a opportunity comes very rarely. It comes only once during the appearance of each Buddha, Samasan Buddha. So basically that's what the Buddha said to the king. And then the Buddha went on to say, "But your minister Kala felt it was a waste and was not at all appreciative. So if I were to give a lengthy discourse, he would become so dissatisfied and uncomfortable, and in consequence, he would suffer much more in the present existence as well as in the next." That means in his next life, he would still continue to suffer. That was why I preached so briefly. So the Buddha basically explained why he did not give a long discourse, although King Pasenadi gave such a grand offering. Normally, after a grand offering, the Buddha would give a full discourse, but this time he just gave a very short speech. So he just explained to Pasenadi, King Pasenadi, why, and then he uttered the verse, right? Then the Buddha added, "Great king, fools do not rejoice in the charities given by others. They end up in the lower worlds, meaning they will not be reborn in a happier place. They will be reborn in a suffering place. In some cases, if people went out to destroy other people's charity, that means doing harm or destruction, causing destruction to other people's offerings, they could be reborn in very, very unwholesome realms. They could become hungry ghosts or even worse than that. Of course, normally if you don't kill, you normally do not get reborn in hell realm, but you could be reborn in lower realms or reborn as an animal, right? So this is what the Buddha said to Pasenadi, and went on to say, "The wise rejoice in other people's charities, and through appreciation and gratitude, they share in the merits gained by others, and they go to the abode of the devas in the life hereafter." That means if we were to partake in charity, if we were to rejoice even in other people's charities, feel grateful and happy about whatever charity is being done by whoever, we could also be reborn in a better place in our future life. So that's really what the Buddha was saying to King Pasenadi, right? So basically the lesson here is rejoice not only in one's own acts of charity, but rejoice in the charities of others and be grateful for their merits as well. So basically this is a very important lesson. And the full verse, again, I repeat here with the Chinese text for the benefit of those who want more clarification. "Misers fare not to the heavenly world, nor do fools praise charity. But the wise rejoice in giving, and by that do they find happiness in the life hereafter." So this is Dhammapada verse 177. So this is one half of today's sharing. I'm going to go on to talk about another sutra about giving, right? So this is basically this Dhammapada verse, right, and the story behind it. So I hope this has been interesting. Now let's move on to the other sutra, right? The other sutra is called the Dāna Mahapala Sutra, which is normally found in the old versions of Pali Kenyan, Anguttara Nikaya, Book of 7, Sutra 49. If you go to Access to Insight, then it is Anguttara Nikaya 7.49. But if you go to the newer Pali text, if you go to sutracentral.net, for instance, you will only find it in Anguttara Nikaya 7.52. I'm not sure about the history behind why some of them are numbered, are renumbered differently, right? So obviously there were 3 more sutras that were added in that book of 7s. But whatever it is, so just bear in mind, if you can't find it in 7.49, look for it in 7.52, whichever text you're looking for. Sometimes it is called by a very short name, Dāna Sutra. But the full name is Dāna Mahapala Sutra. Now, Dāna, we know what it is, giving. Maha means great or higher. So that means it's a higher or greater. And Pala. Pala normally translated as fruition. That means the fruits you gain from good deeds. What you benefit from it. The benefit you get, the fruits you gain from the good deeds. So this is basically the greatest fruits you can gain from doing dana. That's really what the title means. And in this story, the Buddha described 7 wholesome motivations why people give. So there's a long introduction to the story. I will cut it short down to 1 quick page. The story begins by the fact that the Buddha came to a village by the name of Kampa. And this is very near the lake Gangara. So the Buddha came to this town and stayed nearby. No mention whether it was a monastery or what, but whatever it is, the Buddha stayed nearby. And then the villagers of Kampa were very excited. They knew the Buddha was in town. Now they wanted to go listen to the Buddha giving discourse. Now, normally Buddha gives discourses to his disciples, the monks. But now a group of lay people wanted to hear the Buddha give a discourse. So they came to look for the Buddha, hoping to get the Buddha to give a discourse, a Dharma talk. And they came across Venerable Sariputta. So they asked Venerable Sariputta, could we hear the Buddha giving a discourse to us, this group of lay devotees? And Sariputta said, well, the Buddha don't normally just give discourses to lay devotees, but on full moon day, the Buddha will surely do that. So why don't you all come back at the next full moon day? That's what the Sariputta advised all the lay devotees. So of course the lay devotees were very happy that next full moon day they're going to hear a Dharma talk or a discourse from the Buddha. So they came back. The next full moon day, they came back. Next full moon day, they came back, approached Sariputta. Together, they went to see the Buddha. And they paid their respects and all sat down. And then Sariputta, in order to kick things off, started asking the Buddha questions so that based on the question, the Buddha would be able to give a discourse, right? So that there is a topic to talk about. And the topic is, of course, giving, dana. Because the lay devotees, they wanted to do dana. So now the Sariputta asked the Buddha, might there be the case where one person gives a gift of a certain kind and it does not bear great fruit or great benefit, and yet another person gives a gift of the same kind and it bears great fruits and great benefit? In other words, 2 people, one person giving something, there is no great benefit, no great outcome, no great rewards, no great consequences. On the other hand, another person giving more or less the same thing and yet end up benefiting greatly from it, right? Why is that? So in other words, both are giving more or less the same thing, and one benefits and one doesn't. So the Buddha answered, yes, of course, it is possible, and it happens all the time that two people giving the same thing, more or less the same thing, and yet one will not get any benefit or fruition from it, the other one will benefit tremendously from it. And then Sariputta went on to ask, why is that, right? So of course, this was to prompt the Buddha to give a discourse on this question. So Sariputta then went on to ask the Buddha the reason why this is so. And then the Buddha went on to explain, right? The Buddha explained that there are 7 motivations for giving. Here, these 7, the Buddha was referring to 7 motivations that end up with great benefits and great rewards. So these are what we call wholesome motivations. They are also unwholesome motivations. Unwholesome motivations means they okay, I'll just explain unwholesome motivations. I think it's better. Then when we get into the wholesome motivations, it's easier for you to understand. Unwholesome motivations. When you give something to somebody, now think about it. When you give, you let go. What you have given, do you still own it? Is it still yours? No more. So when you have given something, it's no more yours. Let it go. Finish. End of story as far as the process of giving is concerned. Unwholesome means when people give, they have ulterior motives behind it. They want the other person to respect them. They want something back from the other person, the recipient. They want the recipient to obey them. They want to control the recipients. In other words, when you give something and you are still attached to what you are giving and you are trying to control the people who receive it from you, this is very unwholesome, right? So in other words, you have ulterior motive, and this is really the dynamics of your interaction with the recipient. Because when you give, let it go. It's not yours anymore. It's finished. Don't begin to control what people do with what you give. If you do that, then it's unwholesome. So if you give and let it go, that would be the wholesome giving. And there are 7 motivations behind such wholesome giving. So always remember, when you give something, it is no more yours. Let it go. And don't try to demand or expect or hope for something in return from the person who received it from you. Don't try to control what people do. That is called manipulation. Right? Don't give for the purpose of manipulation. That is highly, highly unwholesome. Give because you just want to give it and let it go. So there are 7 such motivations. So let's look at the most simple one now. I want to caution you, some people might not think well of the first reason, but actually there is a good reason why this is a good, wholesome motivation. The first one, giving, seeking for your own benefit, with a mind attached to rewards, not attached to the other person, trying to control that person, but hoping to get something back, not from the recipient, but hoping to gain something from it. And usually this is hoping to accumulate merits. So in other words, we give hoping that, oh, this is the gift that I give, this is very good and I'm going to get good merits from it. Now, that is not a bad thought. I will explain later on. Let's go on with this explanation. Seeking own profit, that means you want to get something for yourself, and that is the accumulation of merits. And then you begin to think, oh, I will enjoy these merits in my next life. I will be reborn in a better place. Now, this is not a bad thought. Some people think, oh, that is not good thought. Don't worry about it. When you are not giving for purpose of manipulation, when you're not giving for the purpose of controlling other people, then it is wholesome. It is when you want to manipulate people that is unwholesome. So if you want to get some merits for yourself, there's nothing wrong with that. So here is a clear case. The Buddha actually made this very clear, right? So he gives his gifts of food, drinks, clothing, shelter, vehicle, garland, perfume, ointment, bedding, lamp, whatever it is that he's giving, right? And after he has done that, eventually on the breakup of the body, and this is usually the phrase that the Buddha used to describe when a person dies, but of course the Buddha never used the word die. The Buddha basically says, on the breakup of the body, that means at the end of your life, he reappears in the realm of the four great kings. So in other words, a person who does this in a wholesome way, even though you are hoping for good merits, accumulation of merits, you can still be reborn in the higher realm, in the realm of the Devas. But this is not talking about giving one time. This is continuously giving. Basically, what this is having is that this is basically getting something as a result of your good action and the merits, the good karma you have accumulated. But this good karma does not last forever. It will bear fruition. It will arise, and then it is gone. You won't have it anymore. So therefore, here the Buddha warned basically. Then, having exhausted that action, that karma, that power, that status, that sovereignty, and all the benefits that you get from all that, he is a returner coming back to this world. That means if you do a lot of giving for the benefit of good karma and merits, you could be reborn in a higher realm. But once you're reborn in a higher realm, you would have exhausted all the merits you have accumulated. And having exhausted all the merits you have accumulated, you will now become reborn as a human again. You become a returner. So out of these 7 motivations, so a few of them, you end up coming back, returning, right? So you could be a Sotapan, 7-time returner, but there's no mention whether a person would have attained Sotapan attainment or not. So there's no mention. So don't assume that one becomes a Sotapan, right? Basically, it just depends on what else you do besides giving, right? But here the Buddha says, when your merits have all been used up, you will come back to this world. That's it. That's why you are a returner. And this is basically a person who is mindfully guarding one's karma and rebirth. Now, I must clarify, there's nothing wrong with that. We know there's karma and there's rebirth. And if we were to mindfully guard it, then what's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with that. So every time we do something, think about doing good and avoiding evil, right? So think about not getting involved in unwholesome states. Now, we mentioned earlier on those 3 big lessons from all the Buddhas. Avoid evil, do good, purify mind. Right? Those are the 3 things. Here, in this first motivation, we are avoiding evil. That's the first thing. Avoid evil. So we are actually at the doorstep of developing ourselves wholesome actions. Right? So this is the entry level of meritorious giving. This is the entry level. There are 7 of them. They progressively become deeper and deeper and stronger. So this is only the entry level. Do it mindfully, aware, and guard your karma, and then you will benefit from it. Right? Then the second one. Now we're progressing a little bit deeper into avoiding evil. That is as a gesture of goodness. With a mind focused on doing good, mindfully doing the right thing. Now we are going beyond avoiding evil. We're going into doing good now, right? So now you're doing something, you're offering a charity, you're offering a dana because it's the good thing to do. It's the right thing to do. And your mind is focused on, it is good to give. I'm giving because it's good to give. I'm happy to give. It's good to give. So this is the next level higher now, right? So this is a little bit more advanced than the first one, which is the entry level. Now we are into it already, right? Now we're doing good, no longer just avoiding evil. And on the breakup of the body, it is possible to be reborn in the realm of the Devas, but this is a slightly higher realm, Devas of the 33, right? Now, I'm not too concerned or interested about all the different realms of Deva, so I'll leave it aside. You can research on this, but this is one step higher now. You're getting into the higher realm, right? Then again, having exhausted all your karma, you will be returning. So here again, you are still going to return back once the merits you have accumulated have all been used up, exhausted. And basically, you're doing this by reason of ethics and for the cultivation of morality. So cultivation of Sila, morality, virtues and morality. So the second reason is for the cultivation of virtues and morality. Now we go on one step further, advancing further. Again, further into doing good, right? Out of one's heritage, with a mind focused on upholding family tradition, customs, and culture. So in other words, some people are brought up in a very good home where the parents will teach them, do good, help people. So you learn from your parents, you learn from your grandparents and whoever, teaching you, and learn from your teachers and from the teachers in your community. You learn that you must help other people, you must do good. So it now becomes your tradition, your culture, part of your customs to do good, right? And with a mind focused on, this was given in the past, done in the past by my father and those before him. It would not be right for me to let this old family custom be discontinued. Again, there's nothing wrong in that because you were brought up very well by your parents and your grandparents who taught you to do good. Now you are just repeating what you have learned and doing it because you have learned that doing good is good, a good thing to do, and it's part of your lifestyle. So in other words, you're doing this because it's part of your lifestyle, right? You're not just only, oh, this is good to give, but it's now, I want to live this life to give people, right? So now it's part of your lifestyle. And again, on the breakup of your body, you will be reborn at a higher realm, the Devas of the hour. And again, you also become a returner, right? Because you have accumulated certain merits from all the goodness that you have done, all the giving, all the offerings you have given, but you will now become a returner. Basically, you're doing it out of respect and to uphold culture, customs, tradition. You have learned it from your parents and now you're practicing it. It is your lifestyle. So now it becomes lifestyle and not just an act by itself, not a standalone act of charity, but now it is part of your life, right? So this is a higher level already. That is the third one. Now moving on to the fourth one, now it goes beyond the self now. Up to that point, it was very it was more or less centered around your own life. But now, sharing one's wealth with a mind focused on sharing. Now you're becoming less and less selfish, or rather to put it in another way, you're becoming more and more selfless. You're becoming sharing already. You're no longer just keeping your wealth to yourself. And here thinking, I am well off, they are not well off. It would not be right for me, being well off, not to give a gift to those who are not well off. So you realize you have abundance, you have wealth, share it, don't be selfish. So this is now a higher level of cultivation. Again, you will be reborn in even a higher realm now, the devas of contentment. Because you are a contented person. With all your wealth, you are not selfish, you are not discontent and greedy. You are contented and you are happy to give. So you're happy to share. So basically, you are still a returner, because there's only a certain amount of merits you gain from sharing. And when those merits are all exhausted and used up, you get to be reborn back as a human being. Basically, this is an act out of goodwill, magnanimity, and sharing one's wealth and access. So this is good because you are now happy to share. Right? So this is the fourth level. Now going one level higher than that, now the motivation becomes very strong and powerful. As a sacrifice, with a mind focused on relieving others of their suffering. Now you are mindful that other people are suffering and you really want to help them. So this is really a very selfless act, right? So you are going deep into doing good already. Very powerful way of doing good is to sacrifice and help other people. And here it is not necessarily referring to those who are well off. You may not be well off, and yet you're willing to give. I can vouch for that from a lot of people I know. You see, I also raise funds to do humanitarian work overseas in other countries, especially in the Philippines. I actually have 3 very regular donors, and they are regular donors. They don't donate much. 20 ringgit, 30 ringgit, 50 ringgit, no, not even 50, 20 ringgit, 30 ringgit, occasionally 10 ringgit. There are 3 people who had no income. One of them is living off his children every month, giving him some pocket money, and he actually offers some of that as a donation. And the second person actually has a lot of savings. No more job. During pandemic, he lost his job, but he was still giving me every month, now and again, a small amount, saying that, please, this is for helping other people. Amazing, you know. They don't have money. He doesn't have a job, but he gives it from his savings. And now I also have a third person who has recently lost her job, and yet she was able to dig money from her pocket and say, please, use this to help other people. So this is sacrifice. This is not sharing wealth anymore. This is sacrifice, because they don't have wealth, and yet they're willing to dig from their pocket, even if they gave 20 ringgit to them. That 20 ringgit, the 30 ringgit, that 50 ringgit is a lot of money for a person who has no income. Realize that. So this is really sacrifice. So as a sacrifice, relieving others of their suffering. Just as there were the great sacrifices of the sages of the past. So here it is referring to historical people who were doing a lot of charity, who were sacrificing not only their wealth, but also sacrificing whatever they can, their own self also. So there was a whole list of all these sages, but I won't go into their stories, but that's a whole list of these. So just as there were the great sacrifices of the sages of the past, then the whole list of them, in the same way, will this be my offering of sacrifice? So if a person is thinking like that, he's really learning from the examples of the great sages of the past. He now offers this sacrifice. So this is now offering as a sacrifice. You are going way deep into very powerful form of selflessness, right? You sacrifice that little that you have in order to help someone who has even less than you, right? But such a person will be reborn again in even higher realm, devas who delight in creation. So the people who do things, to create things, make things. So now you're reborn into that realm of delight in creation. Again, still a returner, because whatever merits you accumulate will eventually be consumed and used up and exhausted, and you will return. And therefore, this is true compassion. A person who acts out of compassion and offer of sacrifice. So this is the 5th motivation. Very, very powerful already. Here we are talking about very powerful motivation. And we're not talking about people who do it one time, two times. It is people who do it continuously. And now we go very high up already. Number 6, rejoicing in one's blessings with a mind focused on peace, gratitude, and happiness in the world. So in other words, you're not just helping other people, you also want to develop or help to change the world. Well, we are not trying to change the world per se, but we are trying to change the world of the people we help. So in other words, the people we help, we have the power to help to change their world by giving to them, sacrificing to them, and bringing to them hope and peace and happiness. And we do this all happily, rejoicing out of gratitude. Not because, oh, I just give, I hope you are okay. But very happily giving. This is giving out of gratitude and joy, you know, and develop and creating peace and happiness in the world. And thinking, when this gift of mind is given, it makes the mind peaceful and serene. Gratification and joy arise. So this is really reaching a very high level. Now we have gone beyond avoiding evil and doing good. We are now into purifying the mind. Avoid evil, do good, purify mind. Now we are into purifying mind already, bringing the mind to a state of peace and happiness and gratitude. So now the mind is becoming pure already. This is the 6th level. And then this person can be reborn at a very high realm of the devas, wielding power over other creations. Okay, so this is a very high, one of the highest level of the deva world. Okay, but again, a returner, because the merits you have accumulated will be exhausted and consumed, and when all that is done, you will be reborn as a human. Right? Basically, out of gratitude for one's blessings, for peace, gratitude, harmony, and happiness. So this person is really doing it with a pure mind. This is out of the purity of mind and heart. So this is really a very high level of giving. And finally, the highest motivation in giving as a support of one's cultivation, with a mind focused on purity and perfection. This is the highest motivation one can have in giving, because it now becomes part of your cultivation. It's no longer just an action. In other words, it's not part of an action. It is not part of a lifestyle. It is part of your own cultivation to give. That giving is now second nature, right? Thinking, this is an ornament for the mind, a support for the mind. Now, this is a person with a pure mind and a mind that is close to perfection already. And then you have something amazing happening now. On the breakup of the body, he appears in the company of the Brahma realm. So this is higher than the Devas. So you have all the Deva realm, right? And then you have the Brahma realm, higher than that, right? And this Brahma realm is also the realm of the non-returner, the anagami, right? At the higher level. So this is at a higher realm now, right? Thus, having exhausted that action, that power, that status, that sovereignty, that means all the merits you have accumulated have all been exhausted, he is non-returner. He does not come back to this world. Wow, you know, you get reborn in that heavenly realm and stay there until a time comes when it's time for enlightenment, right? So there's no real clarity whether this is the Suddhavasa realm, because in the Suddhavasa realm, you are the anagami and you don't come back to human realm. You become enlightened as you pass on, you know, as you pass away, you are enlightened already. So therefore, this is the realm where you no longer come back. non-returner. And this is the highest motivation for giving. The motivation is for purity and perfection of mind, thereby fulfilling the first parami, the first perfection. You have now accomplished, fully accomplished the first perfection. Right? So this is really wonderful. You've reached that highest accomplishment. Right? So in summary, the 7 motivations are, firstly, mindfully guarding one's karma and rebirth. Nothing wrong with that. A lot of people think, oh, if you're thinking of karma and rebirth, that is not good. No, as long as you're not manipulating people. Because once you manipulate people, you are creating bad karma for yourself. Then you don't benefit from this. But you're not. You are doing it, as I mentioned. Remember, always, when you give, let go. Once it is off your hand, it doesn't belong to you anymore. Let it go. Don't try to control people and pull people back and manipulate people. That is very unwholesome. You will suffer from all that. But if you give and let go, then you will benefit from it. And here you realize mindful guarding your karma. And then the next is by reason of cultivating virtues and morality. Now, the first one is avoiding evil. The second one is getting into doing good already. And then you go deeper into doing good. Respect and uphold culture, customs, tradition. It is part of your lifestyle. Giving is part of the way you live your life now. You're no longer doing it as an act. You are now doing because it's part of the way you live your life. And out of goodwill, magnanimity, and sharing of one's wealth, now you are very magnanimous already, generous already, goodwill. You're now offering whatever wealth you have, sharing it. It's into sharing and caring. And going deeper into it, you are now into compassion, offering sacrifices now. Going beyond just giving your wealth, but you are giving whatever you find, help other people, relieve them of their suffering. And now at a very high level, you are now cultivating peace, gratitude, harmony, and happiness. All these, you're purifying your mind already. And finally, at the level where you have purified your mind for purity and perfection of mind, fulfilling the first parami. So these are the 7 motivations. I hope these lessons have been helpful. I hope you have benefited from this sharing and learned something from this. If you have questions, please feel free to post your question in the comment. But before I finish off, I have one announcement to make. This month, July, towards the end of this month, 23rd of July, is the full moon day of the Asalha full moon. See, the Asalha full moon is the day, Vesak full moon is the day when the Buddha became enlightened. Then the Buddha hung around Bodh Gaya for 7 weeks, right? Nearly 2 months. And then he went out looking for his 5 ascetic friends in order to preach to them or teach to them how he had become enlightened. And that means 2 full moon after Vesak. And Vesak is May. Now in July, the full moon. This is the time on Asalha full moon where the Buddha gave the first sermon, the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutra. He gave his first sermon to the 5 ascetics. So this day, the full moon of the Asalha full moon, that means the July full moon, is the 2nd most auspicious day in the Buddhist calendar. It so happened on full moon, Asalha full moon day in 2018, Bhante Punnaji passed away in his sleep. So this Asalha full moon, I'm doing a charity event, food sharing in Sri Lanka. What you see, the pictures there were last month's food sharing with the help of Bhante Sivali, who is in Varanasi at the moment in India. And last month we did food distribution in memory of Bhante Punnaji. But he will be leaving soon, so he can't help me with that time. So I'm getting the help of Bhante Vinita, who some of you will know. In fact, you may know, Bhante Vinita used to be the resident monk of Tiratana Lumbini Garden. Okay, so now he's back in Sri Lanka, staying at the Sri Sudama Viharaya, and this coming Asalha full moon, he will be doing a major food distribution in commemoration of the 3rd anniversary of the passing of Bhante Punaji. And hopefully this we will collect more. In fact, I have already sent ahead of time 5,000 ringgit to Bhante Vinita. And then I'm asking all the students of Bhante Punaji to contribute. And in fact, as of today, we already received more than 7,000 ringgit, more than what I sent. So I'm going to send another round. So if all of you can offer, if you're willing to, if you wish to offer, right, for this food distribution to the poor families in Sri Lanka, please WhatsApp me privately, and then I can let you know how you can make the offering. And Bhante Vinita will be firstly doing food distribution to 100 poor families in the villages in his hometown. His hometown is very near to the town of Madawala. Madawala is the hometown of Bhante Punaji. So it's quite near to Bhante Punaji's hometown, the very poor villages there. 100 families will receive it. And then whatever additional funds that we're going to send to Bhante Vinita, he will then use it to go to the schools, the poor schools, and offer them all kinds of school requisites for the children, and also maybe nutrition or whatever, right? So we have to work something out, and also to old folks home and so on. The more we can collect, the more we can do. We can already do the food distribution to 100 families in 100 poor families. Additional will be to the schools, the old folks home, or the orphanages, and to temples or whatever. So if you are interested, please contact me. All right. So it will be done in commemoration of Bhante, the 3rd anniversary of the passing of Bhante Punaji. It will be done actually exactly on the 22nd of July, the day before the Asalha full moon. All right. So with that, I end my presentation. My email address is there. You can contact me by email, or you can contact me by WhatsApp. So not WhatsApp. So you can contact me by Facebook, right? And don't forget to download these slides. And basically with that, I end my sharing, right? So if you have questions, please remember to post them. And basically, I'm done. Over to you, brother. All right, thank you. Your mic is off.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Brother Billy. A very relevant sharing about Dharma and the spirit of giving. At this time when a lot of people are facing difficulty even to just to put food on the table, I hope this morning we inspire all to aspire to perform a little Dana to anyone who is in need. All right. Do we have any questions? Let me see. Anyone who has any question? Just
I'll just post a comment from Sister Tina. Okay, until we get question, I'll just post whatever nice comment people make.
There are so many suffering people in this time. Just do it. Yeah, couldn't agree more.
There's nothing wrong with doing it for the sake of karma. Nothing wrong with that. As long as you're not manipulating people, that's all it is.
Okay, if there is, I have one question.
Yeah.
Okay. I have one question.
Is that yours there?
Yes, I just posted it. How significant is Dana as compared to like meditation, chanting, or keeping the precept in the hierarchy of Buddha's teaching to attain enlightenment?
Oh, that is a very, very important question, very relevant. and very helpful question. Now, I want you, for those of you who are familiar with the Eightfold Way, I want you to remember the first two deals with Saddha and Virya. That means having confidence in the Dharma, studying the Dharma, understanding the Dharma, and having the willpower to do something about your life. The second part of the Eightfold Way is the cultivation of Sila. And this is where Dana comes in as part of the practice of Sila. The first two of the Eightfold Way is avoiding evil. Now into practicing Sila, you are doing good already. And giving Dana is one of those things you do as part of the cultivation of Sila. Now, if you are not able to cultivate Sila, when you try to meditate, I can tell you, you will not be very successful with meditation. You see, if your mind has not gone into a state of wholesome thinking, when you try to meditate, memories of a lot of unwholesome actions or whatever keeps popping up and disturbing your meditation. But if you have been doing a lot of wholesome good deeds and dana, when you meditate, you feel good about yourself. You know that you have been doing good. So knowing you have been doing good, your mind is at peace. When your mind is at peace, you can meditate better. Meditate is the third part. So repeating, the first part is Saddha and Virya. That is confidence in the Dharma and motivation to practice the Dharma. The second part is Sila, and that is basically cultivating good morality. And the third part is Bhavana, and that is the practice of meditation, right? That leads to Samadhi, right? So if you are not a person who is used to doing good, you will not be at peace with yourself. If you're not at peace with yourself, you cannot meditate very well. So it is very important to cultivate Sila, and doing Dana is one of them. Do it for those 7 motivations. Don't do it to manipulate people. Don't do it for name and fame. Huh?
True. Okay. Understood. Thank you so much.
Okay, so I think that's all we have.
That's all we have. Okay. Would you like to take the lead to share the merits that we have acquired this morning?
Let's do that. We spent the last 1.5 hours together, and we have accumulated a lot of good merits. Nothing wrong with that. So having accumulated those good merits, we realized, let us share the good merits to a lot of people around the world who are suffering from the pandemic. They are still suffering, and they will continue to suffer for some time. So let us put our palms together and recite this together. We dedicate the merits we have acquired from sharing the Buddha Dharma to all beings affected by the coronavirus pandemic around the world. May suffering beings be suffering free. May the fear-struck fearless be. May grieving beings shed all grief. May all beings find peace and relief. By the grace of the merits we have acquired, may we never follow the foolish. May we follow only the wise until we attain the highest and most supreme bliss of Nibbana. Idang me nyatinang hotu sukhita hontu nyatayo. Idang me nyatinang hotu sukhita hontu nyatayo. Idang me nyatinang hotu sukhita hontu nyatayo. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you very much for joining us. Stay safe, and may you be well, comfortable, peaceful, and happy.